the heat on.
I was dealing with sewer. You really want?
Can we turn the heat on? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
So you can, him and I.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
We're good.
We're good to go?
Yep.
Sorry, not me. Okay. Good evening. It's a little after 6 o'clock. No, it's 7 o'clock. Our clock's wrong. I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Please rise and join me in saying the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we are having a little bit of a mic issue this evening, and so we will, for the most part, all be presenting from our seats instead of hopping up to the podium since that mic is not working tonight. And we may have to just make small adjustments as the meeting goes on. Another adjustment, we have Milt Dennison joining us later this evening. He was gonna join us in person, but he's not able to. He's gonna have to Zoom in. So we've made a small adjustment to the action items to put him first so that he can go right after his part of the presentation instead of having to switch in and out of Zoom mode with him.
Info discussion, no action.
We switched him on info?
Info discussion.
Oh, okay. Oh, we switched him to B.
Right.
Okay.
The order.
That I have, okay. So that's the only other thing to call out. And we have Matt Thornton joining us via Zoom tonight, so if you want to jump in and say something, just unmute yourself and speak up. We'll try to look at you as well, so we know what's going on up there.
All right, sounds good.
Does that sound good? Awesome, all right. The first item on our agenda tonight, as always, is the consent agenda. If there are not any questions about the consent agenda, do we have a motion to approve it?
I motion the meeting, that we approve the consent.
Wonderful, is there a second?
Second motion.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, next up, we have Patrick Sugarot. Where is he presenting from?
Table.
One of these. All right, let's spotlight on Archer Glen. And join us at the table.
Well, good evening. I like the new setup, it's very cozy. It's nice and closer to go. My name is Patrick Tuckrow, I'm the principal at Archer Glen Elementary School, and I'm here to talk about a school that I love, and I think a lot of you love as well. I'll start with a little history. Christina, can I go to the next slide? Archer Glen was opened in 1995. It was the second elementary school and the first new school, or at least a newly named school since 1950, when Sherwood Elementary was Hopkins Elementary School was opened. At the time, Sherwood had only 4,700 residents, about the number of students that we have today. Archer Glen is a landmark of the growth in Sherwood. A few years prior to this, Sherwood only had about 3,000 residents, and just a few years afterward, it would have about 12,000. So it's truly a marker of substantial growth in the community and a signal for the investment in our youth and our future through its school system. The four principals that Archer Glen's ever had in its 29 years are photo there. That's the original, Pete Miller. John Womath, who led Archer Glen through some of the most significant boundary changes that it saw. Tim Smith, despite being someone who doesn't call himself a techie, very far from it, he led the school through the pandemic. And then the guy on the right who is still trying to figure things out. And a fun fact about Archer Glen is that at one time it held upwards of 700 students, which includes classrooms in the computer lab and the staff room. It is a very different place today. Next slide, Christine. Thank you. Today, Archer Glen is home to 326 students, 45 incredible staff members, 464 dedicated parents and guardians, and 150 volunteers. There are 6 grade levels, K through 5, 14 classrooms, and 4 special classes, that is PE, music, STEM, library, and any number of clubs, activities, and ways for students to get involved. Next slide, please. Archer Glen is special in many ways, one of which is its culture. It has a very unique, very tight, very relationally driven culture. And my time there over the last 3 years has been, it's been great understanding what has made that culture thrive, what are its characteristics, and how was it built. And I think that is very instructive to all of us. And a part of that certainly is represented in some of our different groups. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about each one. Archer Glen staff is really incredible. They welcome our students warmly and with joy. None do it better than our Morales team, Ms. Morales there, Ms. Switzer. They provide the most essential of services every day, such as our food services team there. They give our students a model for who they may become every now and then. They show our students who their heroes are. That 5th grader there, he wears his badge to school every single day, and that day rate, that obviously was very special for him. And I actually like to take a short pause here and just make sure SPD knows that Brodix is available anytime. His calendar is clear, any services that might be required, and he's happy to help out. Our staff is very tight knit, and a lot of them have been around for a long time, but they still welcome new staff. That's the picture. There are 2 qualities of Archer Glen that get cited often. First is Archer Glen is highly experienced. So many have been around for 15 plus years, some for 25 plus. And it often comes out in a sense of confidence and calm from our parents, knowing that their teachers have been around for a long time. They've seen it all, they've done it all, and they somehow know what type of advice to offer at the right time. Sometimes it comes out in other ways. Recently, we've been getting a lot of children of former students, which is shocking at times for an elementary teacher. It's happening more and more frequently. Yet, the other quality of our staff is that they are learners, which is really incredible to see in such a senior staff. And one example of that is this year, the district is taking on a new optional training called LETRS. It's about literacy, phonics, spelling, those sorts of things. It is 40 hours of rigorous professional development. That is 2 in-service weeks worth of training that teachers are taking on voluntarily. And I'm very proud to report that at Archer Glen, of our 14 teachers, 17 have signed up for the training. They're making fantastic progress. So that would be all of our classroom teachers, their principal, and also their PE teacher, who is now teaching 3 separate reading intervention groups under the period. That is a learner's mentality, that is dedication, that's a type of culture that is sustaining into the future and provides the highest level of instruction for students. Here is the lesson from the Archer Glen staff in terms of its culture. They teach us that the best things happen together, such as all 14 teachers, 17 teachers participating. And that the best things that happen because we don't want to let each other. Next slide, please. Archer Glen, as many of our schools, we have an incredible community. We are extremely lucky to have the parents and the guardians that we have. They are our students' first teachers and true partners in our mission to provide the best education for our students. As I mentioned before, we have 150 volunteers. In a school our size, that is just incredible. And at this point, that amounts to 2,200 volunteer hours, and that's just for the hours that we can count. That doesn't include everything that happens at home. That includes things like classroom parties, chaperoning field trips, art projects, coaching OBOB, the fun run, the school carnival, and that's just to name a few. There's 2 that I would like to highlight. The first is the Kids Heart Challenge. You see that icon there in the bottom right. Our PAC wanted to partner with the American Heart Association to raise money for heart research. We set a school goal of $3,000. We hit that goal on day 2, and we raised a total of $5,000. Our community is truly generous in their time and in their resources. Another thing that I'd like to highlight from our community is the work that they did to put on our school's talent show. Those are the pictures at the top there. Our volunteers work exceptionally hard, and that is a big lift. There's communication, there's applications to go through, queuing and lighting, all sorts of things that can go wrong, and yet nothing ever does. For our kids, this is often the very first time that they're in front of everybody, their parents, their peers, their teachers, and they show us so much of who they are on this. Our PAC and our volunteers do such a wonderful job of creating a supportive environment for our performers. And the best moments were when things went maybe a little wrong, the nerves took over, or there was a technical glitch, or something didn't go as planned. And in every single instance, the response from the audience was a roar of applause, every single time. And this led us to ask ourselves a question. What does a community require of its members in order to show its love? And the answer is nothing. Our love and support comes without condition. We show up because it is important to them, they are important to us. And from an educator's point, I would like to also add that we like to believe that that type of love that comes early is the reason for success and not the result of it. We're not here to bask in your glory, we're here to help you along your path to greatness. So here's the lesson from the Archer Glen. Community embodied by our PAC and our volunteers is that unconditional love and support, especially for those who are early in the path to greatness. Next slide. I don't have many slides, thank you. Okay, our students, they are truly the love and the joy of coming to work every day. You see there on the top left is our chess club. That is a picture of kindergarten, which is a whole nother thing. That is our OBOB team, and I wrote it down to make sure I didn't get it wrong, the Golden Galactic Goats. They're our class pets and great friends. But for our students, the thing that I believe that our students have taught us in the way that they contribute into our culture is that they are leaders. And I want to talk a little bit about a group called Eagle Ambassadors. So we see them pictured there. They are a group of 5th graders who have exemplified model behavior, and they get to do a lot of things. So those 2 pictures there are they MC many assemblies, and then every week we record announcements and they help out with that. And it's a lot of fun. The kids really love it. But the lesson that our students teach us is that leadership is actually not about the privileges, it's about the responsibilities. You can be a great leader and accept no special privileges, but you can't be a leader unless you understand that you are responsible for the well-being of your community. The responsibility to model behavior, the responsibility to be kind, to work hard, and our Eagle Ambassadors do just an incredible job. So this is the lesson from our students, that leadership is everywhere because it doesn't require a position. It doesn't require authority. It is a mindset about doing what is best, what is right, what is kind, what is in service of us, and what we are here to do together. Next slide. Finally, I'd like to share a special project that we put on. This was put up in our library at the beginning of the year. This is a collaboration between Archer Glen students, Sherwood High School art students, and some of our teachers. Its intent is to represent all that we hold dear for us. You'll see some images there about our agricultural roots, our love for the outdoors, our focus on learning, and our aspirations to do great things and to explore. The idea that I'd like to share is that we often talk at Archer Glen about this pairing between affirming where we are and who we are and aspiring for something greater. And that those things go hand in hand. that we can be very proud of the work that we've accomplished. We can be very proud and grateful for the work that came before us, and we can aspire to greater things. And this mural represents that. First, it represents that we are together. And we are together in such a way that it allows us to be our best selves, to be kind, determined, to be creative, brave, and to be leaders. And this is Archer Glen. Archer Glen is committed to each other and to our common cause. Archer Glen shows love and support without condition. Love and support that's given when learning is new and it's vulnerable and success feels far away. Archer Glen is filled with leaders who lead in every small yet significant way. Leadership who puts community first. This is my last year at Archer Glen, and I have 3 months to go. I love every day there. It is the best job that I've ever had, and it barely squeaks out being a teacher in Sherwood. And I love it. I know you have a lot of experiences there too. You know how special it is. I know Archer Glen represents so much of what is right with Sherwood as well. And I'm just really grateful to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing with us. And your presentation is so spot on. I know many of us are Archer Glen past parents, and it is really a special school. I think we were there when there were 700 students. And even then, it felt like such a sweet, special school. And we had incredible teachers and incredible experiences. And I know every family that goes there absolutely raves about it. They're gonna miss you very much. Absolutely.
I would like to also hire you to be a motivational speaker.
You have a job here already?
There were two things that, I mean, well, there's so much that you said during that presentation, but some that I felt actually compelled to write down. The best thing happened because we don't want to let each other down. I mean, that's such an amazing mindset to have, and it's something that I think everybody should adopt for one another, you know, truly just when you feel that sense of responsibility for each other, you really do your best. And that leads me to the second quote, that the Patrick Shepherd quotes of the day. Leadership is a mindset. That is so beyond true. And I just, everybody has the ability to be a leader. It doesn't require a position. You're absolutely correct. And it is a mindset of just being, you know, willing and having that responsibility for each other. And I just really appreciated so much that you said there today. And I'm gonna go back and probably listen to it and write down more of your quotes. Because what a great leader you've been. If that's just a sample of all of your time there, then wow. So really just great to hear.
I just want to say a couple of things. I think Archer Glen opened when I was a freshman in high school, and that was like the biggest deal because it was just three. And I think it's such a shining example of what can go right of an elementary school, and the picture of just the 4 principals in 30 years. Yeah. That's great. And one of them was mine. Pete Miller was my principal at Hopkins when I was in kindergarten. So, I mean, it's just so great to see that like it's such a cultivated family experience here, and you see it just based on who stays and makes a life out of Sherwood themselves and works in the community. And obviously Archer Glen is near and dear to my heart. My kids went through there as well, and many of us. So congratulations, Pat. We're gonna miss you. You've done a phenomenal job at Archer.
Just to be clear, he's not leaving. That's
Yeah.
what I, and for everyone who's at home panicking.
Just another building.
Good, yeah.
Yeah, Patrick, you're right. I think there's a lot of Archer past parents here. And I'm one of those with 2 daughters that went there back in the day, and there's a lot of great elementary schools in Sherwood. They're all top notch, but there's just a different feel there. It's maintained itself, and lot of illustrations of why that is. And I just hope it keeps going, I'm sure, in that vein, that way. There were a lot of fantastic student, parent, teacher times. It was just as fun for me, I think, as was for my two daughters. Quite an experience. So congratulations to you. You saw it, you lived it, you grew it, and that's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you again for being here this evening, we appreciate it. We're gonna move on to the next riveting part of our evening, which will be reports. Hopefully Dr. Lyon has something great for us.
Just actually two quick things. One is to just say thank you to teachers and staff for the long pull from getting back from the winter break to spring break. It's really the most difficult time in our calendar in the sense that it is a long period of just uninterrupted instruction, although we did have the snow events in there this year. But it's a long road, and we're now here upon spring break, and I just want to say thank you to teachers and staff for all of their efforts over these last 3 months. The only other thing is we are in the midst of hiring for the 2 elementary principal openings, and we're at the tail end of that process where we are looking for the new principal to replace Patrick and the new principal in Middleton to replace Millie, who both are coming over to be directors of curriculum to serve the entire district. So we had a 22-member interview team and a very deep applicant pool. Although we did reopen the position to take a look at some other applicants as well. And we're now in a position to consider finalists. We have spring break in here, so won't have an announcement of the 2 selected finalists until after spring break. But we're almost there with the elementary principal hires. And with that, that's all I have tonight.
Excellent. I did not get to sit in on that committee, but I cannot wait to see who you guys hire. I know Harmony's got to sit in, so that's exciting. We can't wait to find out. All right, we will move along to Sabrina. Thanks for being here.
Of course. I actually have a shorter report today, so it's also very scattered, but first off, I want to congratulate our Arrows dance team. If you guys did not hear, they got 2 state championships this past weekend, and they won grand champs, beating Chico, which is super exciting for them. So huge congrats to our dance team. Pretty close after the last meeting, we had our annual balloon pageant, and we just got the total about the last week, I think, and the total that we ended up donating to the storm vendors ended up being $54,501.38. Yeah. And our winners this year was Team Believe, which was Brinley and Emerson. They raised over $11,000, which I might need to check because that is the most. Possibly, don't quote me on that. I also want to highlight Amelia Godard. She won the Portland Rose Festival Court Princess, which was the first in short history. And this position had a very intensive interview process, and it took a very impressive title, and we're super proud of her. We also want to highlight Bridger Schaefer. He was a part of our ski team this year. He had a really good season, and he just placed at regional, so highlight to him. A date in the future is our Spring Fest on Friday, May 10th. This is our fundraiser for our clubs and a great opportunity for the community to get involved in high school. Leadership is putting on a custodial appreciation week the week after spring break. So we are looking for donations for some of their favorite snacks and stuff. So if you are interested, contact me. If you know, I don't know, but and then we also are starting our elections for next school year for student council. We had a really good kickoff meeting today, so it's super exciting. And then next blood drive we have is May 7th. We were Red Cross granted us the ability to have the third blood drive this year because we were the most successful high school in the Portland metro area. So that's super exciting. We are excited to do that. May 7th, it's a Tuesday. And that is all I have. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I had the dance team on my list too, so go Arrows. All right, Hans, I'll let you go first. We'll go down the line and then I'll jump back over to you, Matt. Okay, go ahead, Hans.
I don't have a lot to report, just enjoying the lead up to spring break. I think everybody's ready for that. And finishing with stresses and finals and trimesters and having students feel like they've accomplished a great job, which they have. And congrats also to the basketball team. Girls basketball wasn't mentioned. That's great. They had a good run. They had a lot of fun to watch. I think it'd be joy.
Okay, I'm gonna work backwards. Let's see. So last week was the instructional materials review night that was hosted at the district, here at the district office. And that was just a look at what all the programs that are being piloted and language arts compliance. And it was really good to kind of get like a personalized tour from Marlene and the other teachers to see where we're narrowing down to and how much longer they're piloting before the groups reconvene and make a decision. And that was, it was very good to see, and it's exciting to talk to them and see their passion for it and which curriculums they're really gearing towards. And then before that, a week before, I got to go with Marlene again. We went to Ridges and we got to observe Kelsey Runkle's kindergarten class and see them piloting a curriculum. Was it science, or was it
The Imagine Learning, which they were doing.
right? So it's Imagine Learning, but they were doing a science curriculum, but it encompassed writing and reading. And we both walked away going like, is this kindergarten? Because they were like drawing thermostats and telling us how they worked, and like it was incredible. And I just am amazed at anyone that can wrangle that many little ones and have them working in groups, some independently, some with instructional assistants, and then just on their own. It was really great to see. We were pretty impressed when we walked out of there. And so that was really fun to see. And then the superintendent committee input night that we attended, that most of us could attend last Monday, right? So that was interesting to get feedback from the community there and move forward with surveys and input. So yeah. And then the committee for hiring principals, it's been really busy the last 3 weeks. So, but it's all been great, and it's moving the district forward, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So it's all good things.
Yeah.
I don't have much to report tonight other than thanks to everybody who took the time to complete the superintendent survey. That information is always very helpful, and we appreciate those who took the time to do that, and those who more importantly took it seriously. Also wanted to congratulate the Arrows dance team as well. Looking forward to spring break, and of course, just another mention about the career fair that's coming up in April. Watch for posts about that and information about that. Really awesome that the high school is putting that on for our students. Just another testament to the importance of seeing students through to their success, whatever that success looks like for them, and the support that's offered for them. And so I'm really excited about that. And really glad that high school's putting that on and all the work that goes into it, which is a lot of work. It's impressive, and I'm grateful that they're doing that. Yeah, what is that? Like April 17th.
All right, Director Thornton, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for accommodating me being remote as well. I appreciate it. I'll just say a couple of quick things. I didn't follow in off of Patrick's Archer Glen thing, but Patrick, I just want to say that my son loves going to Archer Glen. He he has not wanted to go to school for a few years, and he loves going to school right now. He looks forward to it. It makes me drive him to school early. So you have created and I know it's you and the staff, but have created a very, very welcoming, student-centered type of environment. And it's made a big difference in his life. So I appreciate it. I know he's not the only student. So you're leaving a good legacy there at Archer Glen. Yeah, the only real thing I want to report is I want to just give some kudos out to Marlene and the whole teaching and learning staff. They've been doing a lot of work. I've been following along the best I can with all the adoptions and curriculum adoptions in math and reading that have been happening. I thoroughly enjoyed getting to do a classroom walkthrough over at Ridges. I think that was last week. It was really fun to see everything in action and to get personally to be back in a classroom again and getting to see what was happening. Some really exciting stuff. And it's real neat to see. But yeah, that's really all I'll say right now. I don't want to take up everybody's time, but good to see everybody, and hi from Austin.
Thank you. I just had a couple quick things too. The community forum, I was kind of bummed it wasn't very well attended. We had like 5 people show up, but I also know it was a Monday night and it was a busy night. There were a lot of sports, a lot of activities, and there wasn't a ton of notice about the fact that that was going on. We only had about a week or a week and a half or so that it was out there. So that was a little bit of a bummer, although the 5 people that came really did have a very personal experience. We got to sit with them and really talk through with them what they'd like to see in this community. On the other side though, Milt, who will be here a little later, said that he was hopeful we'd get about 200 responses to our survey based on the size of our district. And the last he reported last week, we had over 700. So we had a very, very good turnout with regards to our survey. So that made the community night not such a bummer, because it was great to hear that many people really took the time to fill it out and had, you know, an opinion that they wanted to share with us. And that is really what we wanted. I didn't want to get a tiny sample size. It was great to hear from people. So he'll be here later to share that with us. You already congratulated the Arrows. The other people I wanted to congratulate, there are little people, but our 5th grade boys classic took state both in Salem and in Bend, and they were incredible to watch. They were like little dynamos, and anyway, I got to watch lots of their basketball, even though I don't have a 5th grader, and they were incredible. So congratulations to them. Okay, we would now normally be hearing public comment that pertains to the agenda, but I think last time I checked, we don't have any pertaining to the agenda. So the public comment we do have will be at the end of our agenda tonight. And we will move along. So the first item for information and discussion is our fiscal update to the board and the budget committee, and Gary Bennett will be providing that.
Gary, you're gonna have to mute yourself.
Gary needs to mute his microphone.
No, it's okay. I was like, I'm hearing myself through computer. So he's presenting.
Gary, you're gonna wanna mute your mic and your speaker.
Yeah.
Yes.
My mic and-
So he's gonna be
Speaker is not.
Okay.
back.
Think we're good?
Wait, I thought, weren't we having multiple first this section?
I thought that was the change.
Because he was already first in action.
No, Milt was first.
Yeah,
What was first?
well, he's not there.
Is Milt available?
I thought the point was that he was going second, so he went back to back when he was an action item.
That's how we had it set up originally.
That's why. You tell me.
Stand back.
I don't see him there though,
Where
so.
you were the one that talked to him, so what are we doing?
He's not there.
Okay.
So I feel like
We are.
I feel like we made the decision to
We
move
are
to Mr.
proceeding
Bennett.
with Mr. Bennett.
All right.
But also, if we have his contact information.
I will text him.
He just unmuted, so maybe he's.
Milt has actually been here since 7 o'clock.
Hi, Milt.
Hi.
So would you like to move forward with him first?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Milt, we're changing your first.
And I'm not sure, maybe Christine can help me. Hi. Turn on the video, or can I?
You should be able to.
Well, let's give it a try. It says unable to access camera.
That would be on your device, not ours.
I don't know.
Let me know if I need to do a thing on my iPad, Christine, or
I don't know how to turn on the video on your iPad. So.
I know. It usually works fine.
We can hear you though, at least. Oh, but he needs to,
I'm
Project.
projecting, but you won't see what I'm projecting.
Well, as long as I can see the slides, I'll be fine.
You can see us.
I can't see you.
and I don't think you're gonna see what we project if you can't guess.
Yeah, something's going on here. Let me try it again. Let me check my settings. While I'm doing that, you folks are really lucky tonight that I decided to start at Hood River and not at Sherwood. I came down with a horrible cold. Some little snot-nosed kid gave it to me this week. So I'm not there to infect you folks. I'll just infect the Hood River folks.
That sounds good.
Sounds good.
You
Yeah,
wanna
they're
be
doing
healthy,
their,
that's great.
that's right. They're doing their final initial interviews tonight, and they'll hopefully select finalists here in a little while. Okay, let me try this. Excuse me. See what this does. Okay, let's get back to the PowerPoint. Yeah, video's not gonna work, so we'll make it through. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here tonight. Even though our turnout at the community forum was small, the input was great, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at the input we received from those in attendance. And I think our survey count now is 743. So that's a good, great number to have that kind of input. I guess it's 747. So let me just go through. I'm not going to show you the entire survey. We'll be here all night, but you will get a copy of it. The only caution I have is it's anonymous, so there are going to be individual comments that you need to weigh and not get too serious about some of them. So it gave people a chance to say what was on their mind. So here's the role in the district. You can see parents and students, which is nice. Had the highest response rate. And then we go down to staff and the community. It looks like we had one board member who was bored that night and decided to survey. So that's the response rate. And we do the next one, Christine. So the important thing tonight is we asked them to choose up to 8 items from a long list of what they would see as the personal, professional characteristics that they feel would serve Sherwood well as a superintendent. And we call those the qualities and qualifications. So let's just scroll through those. So you see number 1 on the list by quite a margin was somebody who's has integrity and honesty. And then number 2 on the list was put kids first, committed to serving all, good communicator, willing to make tough decisions, personable, has budgeting skills, background in teaching, made the list by quite a few people, budgeting skills. So you can see as you get towards the bottom, how people kind of sorted those factors out. So any question on that so far, board members? Okay. What do we have next, Christine? So then we asked them to choose 8 items of things that are working well in the district. And you can see the top choices were high quality teachers, art, music programs. The school facilities are up to date. Relatively small class sizes. Athletic programs are good. Technology is up to date. And you can scroll down there and see other items that they thought were strengths of the Sherwood School District. Okay. Stop me if you have questions.
I made sure all the board members have had a copy of this and had time to look over it as well.
Oh,
So
good.
this isn't
Good
the first
stuff.
time seeing it, and I
No.
think we've all taken the time to read through the extra comments as well. So we'll stop you if we have questions, but otherwise, go
Okay.
ahead.
There's not too many more slides left. And then we asked, what does the district need to do to improve, to move forward in the future? And so the items that were top listed were positive student. I can't remember what the rest of that says, but we'll figure that out. Financial stability, student safety, security, continue with small class size. Need some leadership consistency. You'll see that in some of the comments that people made. Need more opportunities for student engagement. And of course, funding always shows up there as well. So shouldn't be too many surprises there. So you're going to find this information will come back to you when you start formulating questions for candidates. And so you may want to come back to this and say, we need to ask a question about finances. You need to ask a question about your experience with facilities. And so that's useful when we get to that stage as well. Okay, Miss Christine. Was that it?
That's it.
Okay. So the other piece, and really the key on this next slide is a draft. Do you have that one ready to pull up, Christine?
Yeah, give me just a second.
Sure. So I went through the survey, and I find with districts, typically the qualities and qualifications are all very similar. You want somebody that has integrity, is honest, good listener, those kinds of things. Then I went and looked at the survey results to see if there was any messages there. So this is a draft. Abby, have they seen this yet?
Yes, they've all seen this as well.
Oh.
I wanted them to have an opportunity to take a look at it because
Perfect.
when we get to the conversation about adopting this, I didn't want to be the very first time they'd seen it. I wanted them to have an opportunity to have some thoughts and opinions about what we were going to discuss.
Perfect. So let me just quickly talk about next steps. Hopefully tonight you can come up with a set of qualities and qualifications that will go into the marketing materials. We hope to be on the streets no later than Friday. We already have a heads up posting. You can find that, I think, on the OSB website for sure, just to give people a chance to think about Sherwood. And then once this goes out, it will start our quiet period where you don't have to do anything for a while, as far as the search goes, until it closes on April 22nd. And then we start the application screen, talk about next steps in terms of interviews and those kind of things. So once we get this on the street, you can take a breather for a while, and we'll just watch those applications just roll in, we hope. Excuse
Okay,
me.
wonderful. I'm gonna pop in here for just a minute and summarize kind of what we're looking at. So I know those of you sitting here mostly understand exactly what we're looking at, but for people at home, the survey went out in an attempt to get feedback from our stakeholders so that we could understand loud and clear what is important to our community. While we got to see all of that response data, and we'll use it to form opinions about candidates and questions as we go through that process, the task at hand tonight is that we just have to create a short list of qualities and qualifications that become part of the job posting that then is public to everybody else. So in my mind, we do want to have a good idea of these things, but these are also not the end all be all. This is kind of a starting point of things that we want to encourage this type of person to apply for this position. But really, the rest of the data that we collected is important for us to maintain and hold on to and help that form what we do going forward as we go through the process. Does that help summarize a little what we're looking at
Abby,
now?
you're right on. You want a search job, we can use your help.
Like, I understand what we're doing here tonight. Okay, so as far as
The
your
only
piece
other
of
thing I can
present-
say, the marketing information is already roughed out, so all we're waiting for is qualities and qualifications. Then we can send you copies of the marketing materials.
Perfect. So this is backing up to when we very first met with Bill, we could have moved forward and gotten the posting up quicker if we had forgone wanting to get feedback from our community. But in order to take the time and get feedback, we needed to wait to do the listing. And so we all felt like that was the most important thing to do, even if this specific piece isn't hugely guided. I mean, it's kind of guided by those answers for sure. But we wanted to hear from our community what they really felt like was important. And a lot of the fill in blank stuff, while some of it was kind of silly or off base, a lot of it was really great for us to hear and to know how strongly people feel about certain things. And so Milt, for tonight, this is the piece that you're presenting on, and then it sounds like we're hopping over for another presentation, and then we're gonna come back to this piece and have a discussion and then adopt these qualities and qualifications and get them back over to you.
Yeah, if you need more time, this is all cold, it just came in. Survey finished up on Tuesday. But at some point fairly soon, we need to get those adopted so they can go into the recruitment.
We will get to it this evening.
Okay, good.
Hans, go ahead.
Yeah, Milt, I'm following the train of thought on this, and the explanation by Abby very well. So as I look at that draft, I interpret that to be qualities of the candidates. And I assume OSBA has something that I'm not seeing yet that says qualifications. In other words, let me
Yes.
give an example. You must be a United States citizen. I'm being absurd here, but there's prerequisites for being a superintendent. And obviously, those prerequisites don't want to be too restrictive to eliminate candidates, yet
Right.
there has to be some sort of foundational baseline. So when will we as board members obtain that information? Because that will be in the job posting, I assume.
Yeah, it's already in there. But basically it's master's degree is required. Possess or be able to qualify for a superintendent certificate. Those are the two big ones. Now, boards will add some other things that they think should be qualifications as well. Do you want somebody experienced as a superintendent? You can debate that as a pro or a con, or at least experience at the central office. Yeah.
This is Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy.
We actually have board policy on qualifications for the superintendent. And our intention is to take that language directly off board policy and put it into the OSBA posting. So qualities that we're considering this evening are critically important based on community feedback and survey and the forum, but the qualifications piece is really well spelled out by policy.
Well, that's great. And if you can get that to me, I'll make sure OSBA gets it right away. So they can see how that lines up with what they have already. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I can jump in real quick. I would just say, yeah, that addresses any concern I had. I thought these qualities were very reflective of the survey, and so they look accurate and look like they reflect the survey results. But yeah, like Hans said, qualifications is a very different thing. But if we have a set of qualifications, I haven't seen that list, but I'd love to see it. But I trust that it's a list that is well thought out and reflects what we need as far as a qualification of a person that would be as a superintendent. So yeah, this looks great. That alleviates my concern. Thank you.
So Jeremy, can you make sure board members get a copy of that policy if they don't have it already?
Yes, we will.
Perfect.
And just so the community knows, everybody has access to that also via our website, which is
Your policies, yeah.
our board policies, yes.
And interesting, in Washington, you do not have to have a certificate to be a superintendent. You do as a principal or an assistant superintendent, but not as a superintendent. There it is.
Matt, can you see what Christine just put up? I'm assuming you can.
Yes, I can say it just fine. Thank you.
For those listening along, it's board policy CBA, which is found on the board section of our website.
Yeah, that's going to help a lot. So other questions, and I'll make sure I send a draft final brochure. I guess it's not a draft, but the next version to her that she can send out to you folks for final comments. So any other questions? I need to talk a little bit about marketing.
I don't think there's any other questions. Go ahead.
So typically what we'll do is, I think I mentioned before, we have an email bank of about 40,000 administrators across many of the west side of the country, but other places as well. So once this brochure is finalized, it'll go out immediately to those 40,000 people. We will do the typical postings on COSA, Morgan School Boards, Washington School Boards, Washington Administrators Association, on the Hispanic Administrators website. There might be a couple more. I think the question that Jeremy and I have talked about, do we want to broaden that? And I've sent him some information. Two other sources that are not included in the package would be Education Week and the American Association of School Administrators. So at some point, we'll need some direction. Do we pursue posting at those other two sites as well?
Bill, thank you for that information. I just looked at it just prior to this meeting. What I will do is I will forward it to our board chair. She can share it with other board members and give us some degree of feedback whether administration is going to move forward with one or the other or both of those. The two are AIC and AASA, which have nationwide exposure, two very different price points. I'll work with the board chair to get some feedback on what we want to do there. So let's leave it at that for tonight.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the last thing I'll mention, we're reaching out to potential candidates. Jeremy and I have both talked to 3 or 4 potential candidates. Whether they apply or not, we'll just have to wait and see. We're competing with a couple other districts who are a few weeks ahead of us.
That sounds good. I know one question I'll have for you, and I can direct it through Jeremy, is when we look at those 2 choices, I'd love to know the exposure rate of each of those choices so that we know what we're paying for.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Abby. I'll have to see if somebody in OSBA knows that. Yeah,
Okay.
because they're not inexpensive, so you hope you get good exposure. Education Week, and Jeremy, you may know more than I do. Certainly, if you subscribe to that, you'll see the posting.
Yeah, I'm sure somewhere it lists the subscriber rate, and I can probably Google it, but it would be nice to know those
we'll
two
look that up.
make a decision.
Yeah.
All right, well, I feel good about where we're at. I've had several people reach out to myself, and I know some other board members have as well, and there's a lot of people who are excited about this position coming open, and I think we're gonna have a really good response from candidates. So that's exciting. I think that's the exciting part.
I'm pretty confident you've got a good thing to sell there. You'll get some good quality and some good numbers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, Mel, if there's nothing else for us tonight, we'll let you go. We hope you feel better. And we will make sure to get back to you soon with the qualities and qualifications.
And I won't be coughing and dying on you next time I talk to you, so.
Hey, we just hope you feel better.
We appreciate you managing through this, as difficult as that was, so thank you and.
You're welcome. Yeah, and Christine's been a lifesaver, so
She always is.
always is. Yeah.
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
gang. Have a good rest of the meeting.
You too, take care.
Bye.
Bye. All right. So now that I've messed up our entire agenda, we're gonna go back to Gary Bennett with a fiscal update.
You're talking about the minutes are accurate.
Okay.
Okay.
So that there. Okay, I think I'm sort of unusual sitting here presenting from my chair. So tonight is our second fiscal update. Members of the budget committee want to come up and sit at the table, so you have an opportunity to ask questions. A couple of them could join us tonight, but we wanted to make sure that they were a part of this conversation. We actually have one budget committee member, as you know, resign her position. We have later in the agenda tonight an appointment of a fifth budget committee member, so we'll appoint. We'll bring him up for vote later on for an appointment. So second budget update of the year, we'll get into a few different things tonight. We'll take a look at how we're doing this year and how what next year is looking like. And then we'll take a look at next steps and the timeline for going forward. One thing I will say, just as a sort of a caveat for this, is that the information, especially looking ahead to next year, is fairly preliminary. We've gotten some revenue updates from ODE, but they've been missing some certain elements like the number of students navigating poverty across the state, which is a big factor in how much money each student, each district gets. And so they're having some tough time on their data collection in down there, and that's resulting in us not getting as much information as we wanted, as we normally are used to by this time. So we put it together, doing the best we can. If we need to make an update, we'll bring you back soon for an update if anything changes significantly. I just want to put that out there to start with, though. But let's jump in and take a look at how we're doing this year. Some of these strengths we've talked about, payroll is tracking a little bit under budget. That's always a good thing, because that's our biggest expense. That's about 85% of our budget is people. Revenue is just tracking slightly ahead, which is good. The huge thing is that those sub-fund account deficits have been eliminated. Those have been paid down to zero. We've made those transfers. And so that was a big drain on our budget. And in fact, when you looked at what the general fund, what those sub-funds were borrowing from the general fund, we barely had a positive cash balance or a negative cash balance last year. And so that's a true cash balance, and we're in much better shape this year. And our general fund reserves are increasing. In addition to paying those off, we're nearly double our general fund reserve. So that's good news. Our challenges, which we'll talk about a little bit going on, our levy compression was more than we expected, which resulted in less revenue from the levy. And purchase services forecast is projecting we're going to be over budget by a fair bit this year. I think we've talked about that before in a past one, and that continues to be a challenge for us. Escalation of prices of services is going up significantly. Well, that whole thing is not projecting on the screen. It is on my screen. It's not on yours. Why is that?
Because tonight is the night of
Yeah.
challenges. It's the theme.
It's
Did
just
you
what
get
we're
the
doing.
memo?
Okay.
Yeah,
Let me see if I get out of the better view.
you don't get to the lots from here.
No, that doesn't change anything. It's not interesting. And I can see everything. That is.
We can see a lot.
Okay. Okay, so, well, regardless, you can't see it up there, but our projected ending fund balance is just about $2.1 million, just shy of that, just kind of in the range we've been talking about. That's good news. That's ahead of where we thought we'd be this year. That's about 3% of our revenues, which is significantly better than the 1.59 we ended at last year. We do have board policy that requires us to move towards 8%, and that's a good place to be, and we're headed in that direction.
special revenue funds, this whole fund is not showing up either, although it's closer. This one I updated from what was in the financial forecast. I found, something that was an entry that was increasing revenue and decreasing fund balance by the same amount. It didn't change the bottom line at all, but the numbers didn't quite gel up the way I wanted to, so I did switch this around. We're in good shape in this fund. So my apologies for switching it around, but it didn't change the bottom line, wasn't there? It was just, it wasn't in the accounting part of it, it was in the forecast side of it, looking forward. One thing I wanted to talk about this fund, you might recall that last year, one of the things we did was we eliminated student body funds at the elementary and middle school and moved them into district funds to bring district internal controls over those. We actually transferred those to the general fund, thinking that was a good move, and that's where they sit right now. We're actually gonna move them back to the 200 funds, just to make sure they don't ever skew our fund balance, because those funds, I've been adjusting for them and accounting for them, so they haven't, but it's added some complexity and some muddying of the waters, and so next month, it shouldn't affect our fund balances on either side, but you should see our revenue and expenses go up in the 200 funds and our revenue and expenses go down by the same amount in the 100 fund. And it just kind of cleans things up from an accounting and forecasting standpoint. And talking it through with the auditors, they actually prefer to have it there as well. So we'll make that change and come back to you. The other thing on the 200 fund, and this is actually really good news, we'll be coming to you next month or the month after with a supplementary budget. And one thing that the board does when they set the budget is we appropriate funds, and the board sets limits on appropriation, which is how much we can spend. And the budget that we put together assumed we would get about $700,000 less in funding from one of our grants. So we're actually gonna have to increase our spending limits, but only because we were able to bring in more money, which we talked about earlier. So we'll come to you with a supplementary budget with that, because we need the board to approve that and authorize us to spend those funds. So I just want to give you a little heads up about that, so you're not surprised when you see some supplementary budget and you know what that's kind of all about. Does that make sense? What that's happening there? Okay. Excellent. So good news on that front. Our debt services fund. This is the one where we thought we were going to end the year with a negative fund balance. And we actually ended the year with a slightly positive fund balance. You might recall we raised the amount of taxes we were collecting to pay our bonds by just a little bit, so we didn't go into the negative. It appears we'll build up a sufficient reserve and be able to lower those levels down, and so that should mean that the tax rate that folks pay on the bond, separate from the levy, not the levy that's $1.50 per thousand, but what they pay on the bond on the new high school and the other construction. We promised voters about $4.20 per thousand. The actual rate was closer to $3.50 per thousand. We should be able to go below that this year, so that should be good. That's good news. We built up a reserve in there, so we're in good shape on that fund. Our capital projects fund is also in good shape. This is where we pay for our capital goods. This is where our bond fund sits, among other things. And those funds are finite, but we're in good shape. A bulk of those funds in there are actually set aside for district technology. And the reason is because we set aside a 10-year budget. We took out the last bond for technology and curriculum materials for 10 years. And we're on track to meet that, but our technology department got a $2.2 million grant in the middle of the pandemic, which has really extended those funds. And that's why both of those funds left in there are set aside for technology. So look at it quickly on those. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving forward with getting on to next year, which I think is what most people are probably most interested in.
I don't have a question, but I just do want to add for those that are watching or listening that for the slides that they didn't show completely, you can access those under the agenda on the website as well. So if you're wanting to dig a little bit deeper in, we take it seriously. We want to make sure that you guys know where to access those. So.
Gary, I do have
a catch. Thank you.
Great. Hey, Gary, this is fine. I do have one question because I sometimes have asked this and you stated it very clearly, but I guess I just don't understand how it really works. You indicated in the bond fund, which we all passed graciously here for the new schools, that there was a rate that it was set at, but you indicated that it's actually less. So as a taxpayer, I'm paying less in my tax statement because Why?
It's a little bit complicated,
Oh,
but it has to do with when the firm that we work with, Piper Sandler's, Piper Jaffray then helped us set a rate for a bond at $4.20 per thousand. They made an assumption about what the assessed value of all the properties paying taxes in the city of Sherwood would be when they set that, and they projected out what that assessed value would be over time. And there's been more, assessed value has grown by more than they projected. And because there's more property in Sherwood paying into the tax, everyone pays incrementally less. Does that make sense?
that makes good sense, thank you.
And to be clear, this is on the bond, not the levy. For those listening, there are two different items.
It's on the bond, not the levy. The levy will stay $1.50 for the next 4 years, and then it will go back before the voters. And the bond is different, though. That's a longer term commitment, and that's based on, we set an amount of money we need to make our payments each year, and then the county assessor actually sets the rate. 4 years after this one. Thank you for the question. Any other before we move on? Okay. Financial projections for next year. I already talked about the challenge in the revenue projection for next year based on the information we're getting from ODE. But some strengths, our local option levy, just again, another thank you to the voters and all the people who approved that. That is a difference maker for us, and we would be in really tough financial shape without it. It's an absolute game changer, and we're grateful to have it. We're in the second year of the biennium, which means we have a better sense of the state school fund. We're not wondering what the legislature is going to do in late May with the school budget. We have a good sense of what that is, and the economic forecasts of the state continue to be pretty strong, and that's really good news. Our challenges, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but the changes to classified unemployment laws, where classified staff members who work less than the full year can now claim unemployment for the summer, winter break, and spring break, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but that's going to have a financial impact on us. The capital expenditures that we face are going to require support from the general fund. When we put the bond in place, we set aside a 10-year timeline for curriculum and instruction, which is instructional materials, technology, et cetera, and we're coming up on that 10 years. And so we will have to start making a plan to support those endeavors with the general fund, and that will pull away from what we're able to do. It's just a drain on dollars until it's an important thing, but we need to make sure we do it, and we need to plan for the long term before those funds run out. We are facing a little bit of declining enrollment in this current school year. About 30 students were down, but our ADMW is down about 75 students. So we've seen a surprising reduction in the number of students navigating poverty in our district in the last year from one year to the next. And that's caused, we get an extra weight for those students, an extra quarter of a student essentially for each one of those students to provide the support they need, and the numbers are down as well for that. The good news is we did get some good news yesterday, and then we got our report from our demographers, which we've been waiting on. And it's still in draft form. We haven't had a chance to analyze it. It's a lengthy document. We've been looking through it. But the initial thoughts are that enrollment will start to increase next year and continue to increase for the next several years. And they had been projecting, when we came out of the pandemic, and we thought students would immediately come back to schools, our demographers told us not so much, and they turned out to be right. And their forecasts have tended to be pretty accurate, and it looks like there is some evidence now that we may start to grow again and continue to grow for a while. So that's good news. We'll take a good look at that and see how that impacts this. So the bad news is this year we're down. The good news is next year we appear to be headed up. And by the way, their report last year also said they expected us to be down this year and up next year. So it's consistent with what they've been saying for the last couple of years. The other challenge we just generally face, and there's a slide at the end that will show you this, is our expenses just continue to rise faster than our revenues. And not only just in terms of payroll costs, but just the cost of goods and services. And it's a challenge that's ongoing.
Are you able, for those that are listening, since we're talking about the challenges, with our budget coming forward to dive a little bit deeper, briefly about what the classified unemployment and how that is going to affect us financially.
Absolutely, I have a full slide about that later.
Perfect.
Go ahead. So let's take a look at revenue first. So when we look at our revenue projections, we think our general fund, everything besides the levy, will be about $2 million of an increase. That includes not only the state school fund and property taxes and things of that nature, but that also includes things like pre-kindergarten, pre-K tuition, building rental fees, interest we earn, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We think the local option will go up by about just under $250,000, and then a big jump in our fund balance. So we anticipate our total resources available to us to go up by about $3.4 million. So that's good news. We'll take a look at some of the things that factor into that. One of the things would be just our enrollment forecast. And of course, I put this together in some detail, and then our demographers give us a report the day before we present, but I think it's worth having a couple different looks at the numbers. So the first thing that we really look at, one of the key things is protecting your kindergarten class is a challenge because you don't have any baseline for history. So one thing you do is you take a look at live births by zip code. So in 2019, there was 243 live births in 97140. And so what you can do is you can take a historical average that we've been averaging about 120% of the live births. That's about what our kindergarten class becomes. So the projection is that those 243 live births will turn into 293 students in our kindergarten classes as new families move into the district. I hope that's a conservative estimate. I included in that 120% average the 99.57% average from 2021. And so that might be a little bit low, but I was trying to be a little bit conservative because I want to see the whites of their eyes. If you, and, I want to see their smiling faces. That might be another. So here's another one that cut off on the important part that you want to see. We looked at a couple different scenarios. The scenario we're looking at here, the number that's cut off is the total at the bottom, which is the most interesting number of the bunch. And this would project that we would be at 4624 next year. And this looks at a 2-year history of cohort survival rate. And what that means is, if you look at kindergarten, and it's a little bit of a challenge presenting my seat here, but if you look at kindergarten in 21-22 of 295 students, you can see that grew to 311 students the following year, and then dropped to 307, and then the math would project 317 for the following year. This scenario one looks back 2 years of cohort survival rates and makes a mathematical projection based on 2 years. So kind of 1 year in the lingering into the pandemic. Scenario two gives us about 25 more kids, and it only looks back 1 year. And when you really start pouring into our demographers report, one of the reasons they're projecting numbers a little bit higher yet is that they're actually looking at this year's survival rates, and they have 1 more year of data in their forecast, and so they're looking at the same thing with a more sophisticated model, if that makes sense. So we use the most conservative scenario to build a budget of 4,624 students. That's really close to where we are now. We will adjust it. I put when the report with the demographer was received, but it's when we really analyzed it. And the number we used for estimating budget purposes is 5,486 ADMW, which means weighted student average. And that includes our charter school and all of the weights for students in special education, English as a second language, students navigating poverty, and the whole lot. So that's one factor that affects enrollment, and slightly declining enrollment this year will hurt us because you might recall that we get paid on the highest number of last year's enrollment and the current year's enrollment. So when we drop by 75 ADMW this year, our base drops by 75 kids. Does that make sense? Or our bottom drops. Now, we may go up from there if enrollment declines, but it makes that projection a little bit tougher. The other thing I wanted to talk about, just so the budget committee and the community are aware, is where we stand with the levy. As we've shown this slide a lot, and it's really technical, and I don't want to spend too much time getting into it. But the long and the short of it is, with the levy, we can really tax the gap between the real market value of the property and the assessed value of the property. And you can see that in like 2012-13, those two lines came close together. And that's essentially what we call compression, where those two lines come close together and there's less available tax. We saw a compression of about $700,000 in our levy, less than we anticipated. And the folks at Piper Sandler were so surprised that they did a property by property analysis for us, about a $30,000 pro bono service they did for us, just to try to learn about what's going on. And it's fairly complex, and it has to do with what kind of property is in what zone. The short narrative here is that most of our compression came from commercial and industrial properties. Those properties were never going to gain back the taxation from them. That compression will remain. But the remaining properties in our district have lots of room, and we should hold pretty stable. So I think the bad news is we're not going to recover the lost compression. But I think more important than that, the good news is there should be some stability in those funds going forward, which is what we really need, is to be predictable. And they still should bring in over $6 million and still be an absolute game changer for us. But I did want to just let people know, mainly, I think the main message here is that we talked about compression earlier, and we didn't know if that would continue to get worse or what that would look like. And we now believe that we're looking stable, which is good news. So I already talked about the state school fund grant, and I adjusted that down to the 5486, and that is one of the most, I don't know what the right word to use is, but it's just not the same kind of information we normally get from ODE, and they explained to us why they're waiting for some more numbers. We should have more by the end of the month, and we'll have a better sense of our solid revenue number by the end of the month. They say not to expect major drastic changes, but we'd all just like to see a little more solid information. The other piece is our transportation grant has been forecast too high for several years. And the adjustment, and so what happens is every January, you submit a transportation grant estimate for the following year. And then ODE pays you out, ODE reimburses them 70% of our transportation costs. And then at the end of the year, they reconcile what you actually paid, what you actually spent versus what they actually paid you. And then they either give you more money or take money. What's been happening to us for years is we've been charging too much money to the transportation grant and then getting a negative adjustment at the end of the year, at the end of the following year, because it actually lags by a whole year. And then taking too much money the next year, and it's come out to a neutral cycle, but I would like to get us to a point where we bring in the amount of money that we actually spend, and that's going to be a one-time hit. I hope it's less than $400,000, $480,000, but that's the maximum exposure it's going to be. And then we'll be set, and it's a one-time event, and then we'll adjust that, and we'll be squared up with ODE. And I'm sorry my voice is going. You can understand me.
I'm sure it's intentional.
It is intentional. Jeremy wouldn't let me out of this. Is that pretty clear on that? I'm not sure I explained that very clearly. Did that make sense, folks? Budget committee members?
I understand that correctly. I have to say, as much as I hate when you bring us negative information, I really appreciate that you are so dialed into every little piece of our budget, that you're finding every single little spot where we, we're not really doing things exactly the way we should be. And it's not giving us the numbers that give us a clear idea of our budget and how much money we have. So I appreciate that. I like that all these little corrections, I mean, this one's not little, but I like that these corrections are shoring us up so that we truly know how much money we're working with, and don't have this jaded vision of what we're spending.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's the goal, is to just get as clean as we possibly can and financially healthy as we possibly can.
Gary, real quick question. You said the high end of the exposure is 480. what's the probability of something being less than that? You have any kind of directional context?
You know, I think it might be like $100,000 lower than that, potentially, something along those lines. It just kind of depends on what we spend in transportation, but so it's just sort of it's a little bit of our transportation costs seem to be going up by a little bit for a variety of reasons. And because of that, as we spend more, then we get more back from the state, decreasing that exposure. So I'm not sure it totally helps us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Is a lot of that cost, is that attributable to fuel, or is it loans on buses, or what's the driver of that?
You know, sometimes there are a lot of students that we have to transport out of the district for a variety of reasons. And sometimes we have not had the drivers to do that, and we've had to hire private transportation companies to do it. And actually, that's been cheaper a lot of times than taking like a 10-passenger school bus and driving it across town when somebody drives them in a more fuel efficient vehicle. And so it's costs like that that are just outside of our control. It's not mismanagement of transportation in any way, but you'd be surprised at the number of students that every school district, for a variety of reasons, transports to places outside their district that meet their educational needs.
That's helpful, thank you.
Or for example, homeless students who attend Sherwood, we go pick them up wherever they are and bring them to Sherwood, and there are a number of those kids here, and every district does that same thing. And so it's costs like those. They're hard to project. So getting into expenditures, the first thing we want to do is just take a look at what assumptions we're using here. And so we are engaging in bargaining with our licensed staff this year. And whenever we put together a budget in a year of bargaining, we just use the same COLA that we had the previous year as an assumption as our baseline. And that's just the way we've always done it, and we continue to do it. And so his assumptions have a 3% cost of living allowance increase for certified and our classified staff. So that's our teachers and our classified staff. A 3% COLA actually costs us about 4.5% with contractual step increases, because a first-year teacher not only gets the 3% COLA, they also get a step for moving from their first year to their second year, so they get a step there. And so when you add all that together, it's just about 4.5% for a 3% COLA. I plugged in a healthcare cost increase at 3% in here. Generally, escalation of materials and services at 4%. I heard some good news today that they believe our insurance costs will be about a 4% increase. That's good news. That's what I've been hearing, and I heard that again today. I was a little bit worried about that. After the storm damage, not only to our buildings, but just generally, that's kind of how those things tend to work. You might recall last year, our insurance rates went up drastically, and it was tied to natural disasters all over, and insurance rates just generally rising. So I was happy to hear that. The things that we know are going up more than that, the reason I say generally is the cost of electricity is going up by more than that. We're double digits this year, and we're anticipating double digits again next year. So we've budgeted for that, and then classified unemployment, which I'll talk about in a minute, at $800,000. It also assumes that we're fully staffed at our current levels, plus the following staff members. We have been out of compliance with our PE minutes for a number of years in elementary school, and to come into compliance, we need to hire 3 elementary PE teachers. And so those are in the budget. One of those will be paid for by a grant for a year, perhaps 2 years if we get lucky. But then they'll all be on the general fund after that. We have a 0.2 FTE HR director for 1 year. That's as we transition Steve Everett out into retirement. He'll work a little more than half time next year, and Amanda Hollenberg will transfer in at 0.6, so that's a 1 year. And then a 0.5 teaching and learning director, which is an addition. And then 1 dual language immersion instructional assistant. We're moving up to 4th grade this year, and each of our dual language classes needs a full-time assistant. And so that's the cost on that. Yes.
The 3 elementary PE teachers operate
operationally, what does that look? So what changes for elementary PE when we make that investment?
They get more PE every week. I can't tell you the exact number of days, but I know someone who can.
So it expands our elementary PE program to have about an hour of PE on most days and about 30 minutes of PE on our early release day, Participants Day. And that will bring us into compliance with our Division 22 standards, which is baseline education for all students across Oregon. So that will be at that same level as other students in other districts across the state.
So then, just to make sure I'm understanding, and just for anybody, because I do have elementary school age kids, so that instead of it being a rotational part of their day, it will just be every day.
So
They'll have PE.
there's still a rotation component to this, because we have music and we have STEM as well. And so there will be a rotational component. And so I think I said every day, and I apologize for that. The kids won't have PE every day. The teachers will have that time every day. And 2 of the days of the week, they'll have the hour of PE. And then the 3rd day, they'll have the 30 minutes. Then the other 2 days, they'll have a music in the library, and they'll have a STEM. And so it they will have specials every day.
Okay.
And what those are a little different. And it is an expansion of the PE to hit that minute requirement. Does
Perfect.
that
No,
help?
I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for everybody.
Yeah.
That actually ends up being more PE. for
More
students.
PE,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you for that. So under the classified unemployment law, Senate Bill 489 passed in the last session, and it includes all classified staff who work less than 12 months. And they can claim unemployment during any break period. And so for us, we know that will be at least spring break, winter break, and summer break, and potentially Thanksgiving break as well, because we're closed for that whole week. And how that holiday plays into that, we're not quite sure yet. But when we did some math, we believe our exposure is about $800,000 on this. Lots of business managers have been working to calculate this, but it's a substantial expense. We have a lot of employees, and that's a lot of time that they would be claiming. And so that is a financial hit to our district that passed in the legislature and did not come with any funding to back it up. Any questions about that?
Not a question, but jumping ahead, I wonder if we do have a high turnout of people who are claiming it for Thanksgiving, if that becomes something we consider changing in our calendar, because paying out unemployment over Thanksgiving break, to me, does not make a ton of sense. To preserve having a whole week off of school. I know historically, like Sherwood families love that week off, but if it costs our district more money to give that to them, then that's something I think we're gonna have to take into consideration.
We'd have to take a look at that. And we'll track very carefully how this plays out. One other part of the supplemental budget we need to do next month is we need to create a new fund. And the only way you create a new fund is to take it to the board. And so right now we have a 100, a 200, a 300, and a 400 fund. We need to create a 600 fund and start putting money in it now. We need to set up a payroll liability account and starting putting money in there in this month's payroll. And then once the board approves the creation of a new fund, we'll start putting money into that account. Basically taxing ourselves on our payroll. We're adding an additional fringe rate to our payroll. And we'll put that money into a 600 fund. And the reason we need to start doing it in March is because our exposure is going to be in June, July, and August. And we won't have any funds in that account to pay any of those bills. And so we need to start putting some aside sooner rather than later. And then we'll continue collecting those going forward. So that will impact our ending fund balance not only next year, but it will affect it this year as well.
Hey, Gary, I just have one quick question or clarification. You showed us a few of these numbers, I know in our work sessions. On this slide, you say all classified employees claim. Is this your estimated like worst case scenario at 800,000, or is this what your projection I remember you had like a range of different numbers. You were trying to figure out what was the appropriate, but is this kind of more of the worst case scenario number?
I think the worst case scenario is probably a little bit worse than this, actually. I think this is it's hard to know what this is gonna be. It's hard to know what this is gonna be, but this is on the higher end probably, but this is probably what we'll put as a budget because we can't afford to budget too little and have it hit us harder than what we're thinking.
Okay, thank you.
Also believe that rationally, most people probably will apply because it's extra income.
So it's a conservative estimate, but not a worst case.
I would say that's a good way to put it. It's a conservative estimate, but it could be worse than that if truly all did it.
So apologies, this is my first time hearing, so if I ask a weird question, forgive me. So at what point does it make sense to, if it's now a requirement to pay out unemployment during some of these breaks, would it make sense to run the numbers or making these full-time positions and instead of paying unemployment, at least getting.
So we've taken a look at that, and in some ways, depending on, so say we run a summer school program, and we need to hire instructional assistants for the summer school program, and we need to hire some bus drivers for the summer school program. That's an offer of work, and for that period of time, they could not claim unemployment, for example. So that would be helpful to us. But unemployment pays 50 to 60% of wages, and there are no roll-up costs on there. And so it probably costs us about a third as much to pay unemployment as it does to hire somebody. So if we have something really meaningful and productive for them to do, it makes sense to hire them as an employee, but it would be a further drain on our budget. And it's hard to know how that shakes out. So when you make that offer of work, how many people accept it and come to work, and how many people claim unemployment? How many people then reject the offer of work and don't claim unemployment? It's hard to know. We put a lot of thought into it, but we don't quite know how it's going to play out. And the other thing is the unemployment department. We learned that the Oregon, my brain is fading. The Oregon Employment Department, what's the name of the department? That's not the name. Anyway, they received no additional staff to deal with this, and they're already struggling to keep pace. And so we don't know what it's going to look like in their interactions or our interactions either.
My question is how binding, how broad is this new Senate bill? Do we have avenues to give incentive to classified staff to not file? I mean, ways to save more money by finding different. Are we bound by certain strict laws on it?
Yeah, we're bound by strict laws on this. This
Okay.
gives them license to claim unemployment and we're just gonna have to see how it goes. There's been a lot of conversations among business managers and I think superintendents groups about how to address this, and I think we're all doing our calculations and comparing calculations and trying to figure out what the impact's gonna be, and hope the legislature funds it. I think that's our best bet, is that they actually fund the mandate that they put in front of us.
Yeah.
You're right.
Remind me of that question.
One quick question, just for everybody listening, please. So can we just, classified staff include what, substitute teachers?
No, substitute teachers are actually not even our employees. They work for, we contract those out. So this would be, classified employees include our school secretaries, nutrition services workers, bus drivers, maintenance, custodians, instructional assistants. Who am I missing? All of our hourly rate employees. And this applies to all of our employees who work less than a full year. So we generally refer to those as our 10-month and 11-month employees.
Thank you.
I should have said that up front. Thank you for that question.
I think one of my concerns, and I know some of you guys share the same concern, is that I almost feel, maybe just because of everything we've been through, that we need to be budgeting for our full exposure.
Yes.
Because I mean, everybody's experiencing what we're experiencing. Everybody has less money and higher bills. I mean, that's just the nature of everybody's life right now. And so I feel like people are going to take the opportunity to take this money out and hoping that some won't follow through, potentially puts us in a bad spot with our budget where we don't have what we need the following year. And it sucks because, you know, we're doing everything we can to get healthy and to do all the right things and the levy and everything else we've done to get in a good spot. But the reality is we don't pick this and it comes with no funding. And so I feel like we have to really look at that number and decide if that's our full exposure and a budget for that full exposure. I'd rather have money left over and say we didn't quite have to pay it all out than get to a place where we're like, well, we can't really afford that curriculum because we have all these expenses to pay out.
That's why we picked this number, was to take, you know, really a super conservative, very aggressive look at what that would be. I mean, this is, yeah.
Okay.
Is there anyone that you know of, any groups that are talking to legislators and advocating that they fund this item, this burden that they put on school districts, that they obviously somebody that didn't have any experience in how, I mean, if we have a little funding as it is, and this is a huge burden to school districts, is there a group that's advocating, look, you know, if you make this, you give us the funding to support it, otherwise it's only hurting, in the end, it's only going to hurt students.
I'm not aware of anybody fighting it now. My guess is you will see. I don't want to project what other groups are going to do, but my guess is OSBA and COSA are going to hear about this from superintendents and from school districts.
I would have hoped they were already addressing.
I'm sure that, I know they've heard about it from superintendent groups and business managers, without question. Yeah, this is a significant cost.
It's frustrating as we just passed the levy and then to have this come across to us and being told it passed. And then having the community feel like they're funding people's vacations or unemployment out of their taxes. That's what it looks like. But so that's really frustrating that we're now incurring all these costs.
Long term, this will, I mean, I'm just thinking long term, if we don't end up funding this, then maybe it does become a contract employee type situation, right? Which, I mean, in an ideal, that would be a complete reform of a lot of the ways that things are done. But school districts can't afford to be paying a full year salary to people that signed up for a job that they knew was a 10-month job. And they did it for reasons, they signed up purposely for that because, you know, it's beneficial in a lot of ways. And this is a huge burden on the taxpayers. It's very disappointing that our lawmakers do this.
It's not your fault.
I know.
Sorry, you feel our anger.
I'm just taking an apolitical stance and I am.
Yes, you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
It does, excuse me. It does seem like, at least looking in, because so this is money that we have no control, like this money goes out the door without our control, but one thing that we could control is are there investments, are there ways we could partner elsewhere to, so if we have to send this money out the door, could we do something productive or absorb that cost into some sort of productive service? I don't know what that looks like, but that may be something just to have on the agenda over the next year to say, are there, you know, instead of putting people on unemployment, are there places where it makes sense to?
We've certainly talked about that. And there's a whole lot of rules about what is a suitable offer of work for someone who is, say, an instructional assistant. You we can't just give them any job. There's some challenges around that about what we offer as well. We're definitely looking into that. And our hope is that through some needs we have in the district, we can put some people to work in a productive way that will help the district. And that's what we're talking about.
No, and that was the main kind of comment as I'm sitting here digesting this is just for being able to communicate to the community that we're trying, we are trying to make the best of this situation and look for any opportunity to adapt to a changing landscape and to make sure that if the school district has to send resources out the door, we're doing our best to maximize the value of those resources.
And we will,
Yeah.
I mean, I doubt.
No question. We spent a lot of time in a recent business manager meeting talking about the nuances of what that would look like and trying to put some plans together. Collaborating with districts across the region to figure this out. And we talked about it internally for a bit as well.
So, but this year might be the last year that we have a week-long Thanksgiving break.
Yeah, what changes do we need to
Oh, we
make?
already saw it. Oh, well, we can also go to revise it. So,
But I just, like, as a community member, I think even if it turns out that we can't do some things, explaining why we can't do things and the things that we're looking into and trying, I think that at least shows.
ultimately, this is, every expense like this ultimately ends up hurting the students because it's money that's taken away from them and programs for them and all of that. And that's what our job is going to be to avoid as much as possible. Because that's the number one priority is shielding them from stupid laws like this.
Well, we're lucky to be a district that can absorb something. There's a lot of other districts around that are already making big cuts and this just adds cuts on top of those.
I can't fathom how I would feel about this if we did not pass a levy and we reduced $6 million. And we had to come up with another 800,000 on top of that. It would have just been draconian. So I don't want to get too political here, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Everybody gets that? Okay. Perfect. So our expenditure forecast, you can really see that show up in the associated payroll costs, where when you add $800,000 to your associated payroll costs, and that's where all of your benefits lie, you can see that those are up by almost $2.2 million next year. Salaries up by about $1.9 million. The good news is we have less in transfers because we paid off all those sub-fund debts. So we don't have to transfer money from the general fund to pay for those. So that's good news. And our athletic director did a great job managing the budget this year. And so our transfer to athletics is a little bit smaller than we anticipated. So that's good news. In fact, here are those transfers next year that we're projecting. We may not need the full $300,000 for nutrition services. Gia Saporito's doing a great job of running that like a business. She's increasing demand, which is increasing the amount of food spot, which is helping our margins, and everybody's winning out of that. So that's great news. As I said, athletics looks a little better than we anticipated. I thought that number was going to be closer to 600,000 this year, and so that's really good news. You can also see that we need to start setting some money aside for curriculum and technology. That's the name of the fund. But we really need to start setting aside money for instructional materials as those bond funds dwindle down. We've got some significant turf replacement costs. It's still cheaper over the long term than watering and maintaining grass. But every 10 years or so, you have to start replacing those fields. And then we need to start setting aside some money out of the general fund for bus replacement. So our total transfers are about 1.4 million. And I would anticipate that number to grow, not shrink overall as we move the actual cost for curriculum adoption is probably close to $700,000 a year right now. We have some money left over, but we need to move that from 400 to 500 to 600 to 700 and make that a part of our budget or somewhere in that range. And similar things with turf replacement, we're just gonna have to slowly escalate those as they become part of what we do. But better to plan ahead and do a job. So what that means, and there's still lots to learn about our enrollment and about our revenue. But if things played out exactly as I projected, our expenditures would outpace our revenues by about $677,000 next year. So we would need to make some adjustments there. One thing I will tell you is we still have not accounted for the loss of 400 kids in this district. We have made reductions. One of the things we talked about with the levy is that those reductions could come through attrition. They could come with intention and with a scalpel and not with a machete like they would have had to come with without the levy. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a second. But the news is that if this plays out exactly as is, we're looking at an operating deficit of almost $700,000 next year. You can look at this slide here. If I get the right slide. And this slide shows kind of what's happening to us. And the top is our general fund resources, including fund balance. And you can see over a period of 7 years what those general fund resources amounts have been. And then the line below is the growth each year from year to year. And the line in green is the average growth without the year of the levy in it, where we had double-digit increases that I felt like was sort of an anomaly. But you can see that over the past 7 years, on average, our revenues have grown by about 2.64%, and our expenses have grown by closer to 4%. And it's just kind of been this continual squeeze over time as inflationary pressures hit us, and our revenues have just not kept pace. And even in the current year, the way they do the state school fund, we get 59% of the first year, 49% of the first year, and 51% of the second year of biennium, so a 4% increase. But even at a 3% COLA, our labor costs go up by 4.5%. So we're automatically losing ground just right there, if that makes sense, on 85% of our budget. And that's just that continual slow burn, frog in a pot of boiling water kind of squeeze we're feeling right now.
And then just to be clear for people, this isn't just us. This is most districts around the state, correct?
This is districts across the state, and there are some districts looking at, I don't want to say we were lucky because we didn't get all the ESSER funds, the federal funds from the pandemic, but a lot of districts that did not manage those funds very well. We didn't get enough to get ourselves into too much trouble, but there are a lot of districts who are cutting humongous amounts of money because they're feeling this squeeze, and those funds bailed them out for a while, but not forever. And I think as you watch the papers, you're going to see more and more districts talking about making significant reductions to their budgets in the coming years.
Well, just to chime in before, just to give credit where credit's due, like my understanding is that the district administration here very intentionally didn't make long-term investments with short-term money and end up in that position. So it wasn't happenstance that we find ourselves in this position. It was an engineer.
That is true.
Maybe administration.
We did not make any long-term commitments like staff that were long-term with those short-term funds. That's the problem we got into. So we were very intentional about that. Okay, so next steps. We'll monitor this and update assumptions. We really need to pour into that demography report. It's a fairly lengthy report and it's only in draft form. Hopefully we'll get an updated state school fund estimate later in March that we can really hang our hat on. We're currently building the budget. We're just about done building the budget in the system, and we'll test all these projections. So we have a couple different looks at the same thing. And if those numbers are close together, we'll know we're on board. And if there's a gap between them, we'll know we got some refinement to do. And we'll make adjustments as new information arises. This is what I was referring to earlier. I got to touch on a sequence, but we have not adjusted for the loss of those kids, and we did state through the campaign that we would have to adjust eventually. And I just want to make that clear that this was part of the plan through attrition and with intention. And I think it's just important for everybody to know that we are in the first year of an economic recovery. Just because we passed the levy didn't mean everything was suddenly perfect. We need to build our reserves. We need to pay off those sub-fund deficits. We need to adjust things like our transportation grant, and we need to get to a financially healthy position with good reserves in the bank. And we're in year one of a multi-year process of that. And I just want to remind people of that we are in much better shape than we would be otherwise, but we still have to pay attention and do the hard work. So the one thing I do want to make sure we're really clear on is if reductions are needed, we have several retirements on the books already. We have others who are leaving the district for other reasons, and we have temporary employees. And we will work to make all of these reductions, if they're needed at all, through attrition, not by layoffs. And so that's, I think, an important thing to note, so people don't get panicked. And just a timeline going forward. May 15th, we'll do another board and budget committee fiscal update. That'll be just an overview of the budget. In the past, we've asked the budget committee to approve the budget on the first night they've seen it, basically, officially. What we'll do this time is we'll do an overview of the budget 8 days before. That'll give you a chance to really think about it, ponder it over. You'll have the budget document a few days before that to review yourself. Then we'll come back and have a budget committee meeting on May 23rd and review the budget. We've set aside a couple of later budget committee meeting dates just in case you have further questions if it doesn't get adopted or approved, and then hope to adopt the budget by the board on June 5th. We've built in contingency dates just in case things don't go as planned. The other thing I would say about this is we've kind of kicked this down the road as late as possible, wanting to have the most possible information when we build our budget. You never have perfect information, but the later, the better in our mind. And so a lot of districts will adopt earlier than us, but we're moving it down to May and June so we can really take a good look at what's going on. And that's all I've got. Any questions before we move to the next topic?
I don't think there's any questions. I love math, the school finance is quickly becoming my least favorite subject. I understand it very well and I like it.
I hope to change that.
Yes. And I mean, for people listening too, the whole making movement through attrition, it is a very well thought out move. I mean, I know this last year, we had conversations, you guys had conversations and shared with us, but up until the very last second about where to put even just one extra teacher because you're trying to balance the classroom so well. And there's always somebody who feels a little bit of that pinch at classroom or grade level that goes up by a couple because of that teacher moving out. But ultimately, those are things that we still do have to do in order to catch up with where we are at right now. So we'll do our best to communicate that as that happens, but I know that you guys are doing a ton of work on that end. And so I want people to know at home, it is not a quick and easy decision. And there's a lot of thought that goes into that, how to spread those people out.
Oh, sure. Thank you for that clarification. That's true. We work really hard to smooth that out as best we can.
For sure. Okay, are there any other questions or comments before we move along? Thank you for the very comprehensive fiscal update this evening. All right, we left qualities and qualifications. Thank you guys for joining us. And now we're gonna go back to it because that's the order we're in tonight. So in front of you guys is a draft of qualities and qualifications. I know everybody has had some opportunity to look through them. It says on here that Milt's gonna be with us for this, but I would imagine he's not still with us. So it's really our task to look through these and have a little bit of a conversation here about what we think of them. And if we want to adopt them as is or make changes. But I guess I will really just open it up to you. Let me know what you're thinking.
I mean, I've had the opportunity to review these. They were derived directly from the survey. And so, while discussion is open, to discuss it, I'll just start by making a motion that we adopt the list of qualities and qualifications for the superintendent candidates as informed by the stakeholder feedback and as per board policy.
Can I back up a little bit?
You absolutely can.
Okay, so if I understand right, this would be going into a posting?
Correct.
Okay, can we wordsmith this a little bit or? Okay.
We absolutely can. We just have to agree on it.
Okay, if everybody take a look at I wrote down a couple things, so they're not big. But committed to serving all kids, with kids first. Could we think about changing that to, I wrote it down, somebody else has something.
This is all you.
Yeah, I wrote it down somewhere. Could we change that wording from kids to students and educators instead of committed to serving all kids, serving all students and educators, put students and educators first.
I think that is a
Making
wonderful.
decisions, take kids out of there.
Matt, are you following along with us on that?
Yeah, I'm following along. I agree with the idea of not using the word kids and using students and educators.
Okay, so while we're not voting on it yet, it seems like everyone's in
Okay.
agreement with that. Are you going in order?
Yeah, that was my major one. I think
Okay,
that,
sorry, I'm just so typing.
I'll stop right now.
Bounce around, I'm like,
I'll stop right now.
that's it?
Let me look one more
I
time.
thought you were gonna really bring it with some words.
No, it's just a few words. All right. Yeah, I think that was the main one. So I'll stop that.
Last year.
I did, sorry.
You're fine.
Strong core values. Do we need to say a couple core values? Does everybody know what core values means? Are we all the same?
I think you leave it broad, because if you don't, you can significantly narrow things down. Strong core values, I think, speaks for itself.
Well, then I might argue, do we even need it in? Does it need?
I mean, I kind of agree with what you're saying. A lot of these things are kind of up for interpretation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like exceptional communication skills.
Yeah.
I still think we need it in there, but what I might think is exceptional, you may not.
Right.
So they are fairly subjective, I will give you that. I think we want their core values to kind of mimic the values that we have set aside for our school district. So, I mean, we have a mission statement and values that we say are part of our district. And I think that for me, I'm looking for a superintendent who aligns with those values.
So can we say something?
Reflecting our school district.
Correct.
So can we say something like strong core values that align with districts?
Sure, schools
Strong
district.
core values reflecting
Sure, school district.
Sherwood community values.
I guess the only thing is the core values can mean so many, that's so broad.
It is broad.
So.
And for me, unwavering integrity and values don't really, like, advancing student success, honestly, those are almost like two separate bullet points. One that's really more about like
Strong-
academics and rigor.
Strong core values reflected in our Sherwood community.
Yeah, you could say that. Demonstrates unwavering integrity and strong core values reflected. How do you want that to say? Repeat it for Christine. Demonstrates unwavering integrity, strong core values. How do you want to say that? Reflective.
Reflected
Reflective
in our
of the
Sherwood
community.
community. Period, and then you're right, Abby, I like what you said, period, and another bullet, commitment to advancing student success. Separate bullet.
Yeah, I don't think they're the same thing.
Yeah. And those were the two.
Those are great additions.
Thank you.
I feel like we're all looking for it, so maybe it doesn't have to be in here. But because we've used the word transparency like 7,000 times this last year, it feels like we all know we're looking for someone who is transparent, but like it almost should be a part of this statement.
So could you say incorporates transparency and integrity into decision processes? Right. The fourth one down.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, like that.
Matt, just speak up if you are not in agreement with any of this.
I was just gonna say, we put transparency on the, down there by the, where you just did. So yep, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I think some of these are very like, very tangible, obviously experience in finance areas. Yeah, we want visibility in the community. But yeah, some of these other ones do feel like a little bit like word salad. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what they are because they're so subjective, but this very looks like to me captures the reflection of the survey. So, I mean, we could wordsmith it forever, but I like it overall. I think this is a good statement.
I believe it's a good base point and then be a good place to start. And then, of course, the dialing in on these items will come during interviews.
yeah, and I would agree with you. It is really reflective of the feedback we got. All right. So,
Since changes were made, I do believe we need a clean motion, something to the effect of with adjustments as required.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, so I recommend we adopt a list of qualities and qualifications for superintendent candidates as informed by stakeholder feedback, the current discussion and changes and as per board policy.
all right, is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Who's the second?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries 5-0. Okay, move on. Back to Mr. Benny. With hopefully some more exciting news.
Thank you. This is very exciting news.
It's brief news.
It's brief. It's also very exciting for those of us who have to implement this or get to implement this one. So last month we brought to you an update to policy DN, which is what we do with a surplus goods policy. We received no comments at the preceding time between last board meeting and this. So tonight we're asking for adoption of policy DN.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the proposed revision to policy DN?
I recommend we adopt the proposed revision of policy DN as presented.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. You can now get rid of some of your junk.
No idea.
But only the junk, only the junk. Only the junk. Last month, we received a resignation for position number 5 on the budget committee. Following that resignation, we opened up that position for applications. This evening, we are tasked with appointing a new committee member. Is there a motion to appoint a new budget committee member?
I recommend we appoint Ben Spidel. I recommend we appoint Ben Spidel for the completion of the unfinished term of budget committee position number 5, beginning March 21st, 2024 and serving June 30th, 2025.
Wonderful. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Last up, Jim Rose is here with a request for interdistrict transfers.
Give Christine just a little slide deck.
Thank you.
But in getting started, I'll remind you that the state law currently sets how inter-district transfers, these are between our district and another district, are to occur. And one of the requirements is that at least annually you as a board have to authorize or not authorize the approval of inter-district transfers. If you hit the next slide. So that state law requires that it's a non-discriminatory process. We don't get to ask very many questions of those students who want to come into our district. And so we do have a process that requires a lottery, and so we open up slots if approved. And if those number of slots in the time frame that we set are full, then if there's more requests than capacity, we have a lottery process to allow the fair distribution of those. There are a couple of requirements for remaining in Sherwood School District. Once a inter-district transfer has been granted, the attendance has to be 52%. And behavior, there's some requirements around no more than one suspension per academic year and no suspension of 5 or more days and expulsions. In the past, we used this kind of pre-bond era as we used it sparingly as a budgeting. With the additional capacity created by the building of the high school and reconfiguration of our other school buildings, it became an option for us to actually allow these inter-district transfers at both the middle school and elementary level as well. And we've done that now for a few years. And it is proving to be very helpful to our budget, the number of students that we have coming in. But again, this is a board level decision that we ask this to make. Steve, if you would go to the next slide. Just as a quick reminder, kind of our capacity for the buildings and then registrations. Again, like with Gary's presentation, the latest numbers from Davis, their draft report is not reflected here. But you can see we are well within our current capacities. Next slide, please. So I'll go through this kind of level by level and then have time for questions is where you can ask as we go. But traditionally, we've done 38 kindergarten and 10 per grade for grades 1 through 5. We'll continue that through class this year for a total of 80 elementary students across the district. These would not be all students in one location. And we assign schools based on capacity, both at the building and the grade level. And we try to do that in balance with, like, these are people wanting to come into our district. They need answers sooner rather than later, which school they're going to, so they know daycare, transportation, those kinds of things. But also with trying to make sure that as we have our own, but as we have students that live within our district that might come to us in the spring and summer, that we get those students registered and that we're not over putting too many students in one building at one time. So we kind of balance that out as best we can. And then we do, of course, try to keep siblings together, so we don't have families from out of district having to take kids to 2 different elementaries because we had capacity in second grade in one building, but grade in another. Next slide, please. At the middle school, we have one change here in that we are asking 20 students in 6th grade. In the past, we did 30 students across all 3 grades. It's stepping down from from 6th, 7th, and 8th. So we had 15 and 6th, 10 and 7th, and 5 at 8th grade. And now we're asking for 20 in 6th grade and then still 10. That's a total of 40 students at the middle school. And then the high school, as we've done in the past, 20 students at 9th grade, and then 10 per grade at each of the 3 grades, a total of 50 students. We also need to set the number of inter-district transfers that we will allow out of our district. And we have done 30 students for a number of years, and those are typically taken up. We have this current year, we've had to turn a few students away that had requested one, but we're out of slots for transferring. With that, I will take any questions you may have.
Regarding can we go back to the slide about the standards they have to meet? Yeah, so the requirements for remaining in the district, How, are those requirements regulated by anyone other than us? Like, is there certain kind of laws or policies in place that?
I think the law allows us to regulate on those two things, but doesn't set the level of requirement.
Okay, so my only concern here is that, I mean, it takes a lot for a student to get to a point of suspension these days. And we all know that we're facing a lot of behavioral challenges within our schools. And so, you know, personally, I would like to see a little bit more of a stringent behavior parameter on our transfers in. You know, I hear a lot about behavioral issues happening, and that, like I said, that suspensions really don't happen because of certain you know, but it's better to keep them in school and just all kinds of things that go into that. But you hear about a lot of referrals being given. So would there be any possibility in discussing changing this parameter to can't have more than a certain amount of referrals and taking away the suspension? Because eventually all those referrals will lead to a suspension. But there can be, you know, 20-something referrals given over the course of the school year for pretty bad behavior, where a kid never actually gets suspended, but is bringing a lot of toxic behavior into the classroom or in school. And some of this we can't control with students that didn't transfer in that are already living here. But it would be nice to be able to have a little bit more control over those that we could. And so we've got students here that transferred in that are just causing problem after problem, getting, you know, a referral a week. I feel like we should maybe adjust this a little bit. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I just have a question of, do we keep track on behavioral discipline of those transfer students, and are they a problem currently? I just don't know the number on that.
We have sent kids away this year because they've been in these standard things.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear one. I didn't hear it.
We have excluded, or what we call revoked, kids transfers requests because they haven't met either attendance and behavior within.
Okay, so I was gonna broaden Kristen's comment a bit and maybe confused by your response. But I'm a student wanting to be sure. Dude, is there a background check on that student?
No.
Okay, so that might be something, if we have somebody jumping from one to other, and why would that be?
Right, that's why I'm saying, I'd
Well,
like to add I'd like to add some more things into this requirement.
no, but I thought your question was, once they're here,
Yeah,
this is.
yeah, because there's nothing.
No, once they're here, this is, I understand this.
Right, so we
You
can't.
don't understand that, but. Okay, but once they're here, they have to maintain 92% attendance.
Mhm.
This is once they're in.
Yes,
I'm talking about expanding it once prior to getting in.
there's
Yeah.
nothing.
No, we
can
understand what
do.
you're asking. We can't-
Because that's state law,
Discriminatory.
to keep it as non-discriminatory as possible, they have limited what we're able to do,
So
so.
there's no looking.
We can't ask if they have IEPs, we can't ask if they've been suspended.
I mean, obviously that'd be great, but we can't ask that. So she's saying, since if they're here and they continue to be a behavior problem or they're lacking in attendance.
We need more.
Can we make an adjustment?
Yeah.
Since suspensions aren't very commonplace.
Okay, I understand.
So I want to add
Thank
to, you know, no more than one suspension per academic year, but I'd also like to add no more than a certain amount of referrals per academic year. I'd like to be more strict on that. We have a lot of behavioral issues going on, and we need to be able to control what we can.
Do you find that there's a gap between getting to that point of sending students away and then a numerous amount of referral? Like, is there this gray area where we're not able to control this?
Right.
There's too many mics on.
Okay, I'm like, it's not working, so. We actually don't, most of our transfer students by and large meet the requirements, and when they don't, we we run them through a process. The attendance process takes a little bit longer because we do sit down and have like an intervention meeting where we bring the family in and we do give them a chance to recover. You know, no more than one suspension per academic year. There's no conversation if there's a second suspension because that first suspension was the first intervention conversation. So that just immediately happens.
Right.
And so we're not, you know, we're not seeing our transfer students be our high flyers, if that's what you're maybe thinking that they're the ones.
No, I'm not at all implying that our transfer students are the ones that are causing the problem. What I'm suggesting that we do is that we tighten up that language a little bit. So that for the students that are transferred in, that do cause behavioral problems or do bring in behavioral problems, that we have a little bit more control over just the one suspension. If we have a transfer in who's getting a referral a month, you know, that is, in my opinion, when you have bad behavior and bad actors like that, it bleeds. And so we need to be able to control what we can, and we can't necessarily, I understand that we have guidelines in place for our kids that live here and that are in the district, and you know, this is one thing that we can control a little bit more. And so I would like to see it added where, you know, and I guess this is where I would appreciate some educators' input on this, but you know, what is a lot of referrals? When is too much? And I like that language up in there. I don't want it leaving, you know, alone at just suspension, because so much can happen before a suspension ever even happens. And you know, top it up. Matt, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I want to make a comment. I just don't want to interrupt you, and I'll make sure it's the right time. Yeah, I mean, being a former teacher, because I totally get what you're saying, as far as behaviors getting out of control, and we need to, like, you know, address those very seriously. I guess my concern is referrals often are going to come from a non-admin, right? They're going to come from a teacher. They're going to come from some other person working in the building. A suspension will be that principal. That principal will make that decision. And when we're talking about a decision that is going to cause a student to have to leave their home school, which is a very disruptive life event, I'm not sure as a classroom teacher I want to be in that position, right? Like I don't want to be the one like, oh, you've got one more referral to go and now I'm leaving. Like that's you know, I don't know if that's the right approach. I mean, I would be open to discussing it, and if the SSD thinks that we need more language here, I'd be open to discussing that. But I think the suspension is, you know, you get one chance, and then you're gone. And that's when you get to a suspension, it is a serious event, and that is a decision that's made by admin, which is where I think it should be. But that's just my opinion. I would like to hear what Marlene thinks about that, or Jeremy. That's just my take on it.
So I hear you and I respect your opinion, but it's often the teachers themselves that are having to manage this behavior on a daily basis. And that it is their classroom that this behavior is disrupting. Or if it's the lunchroom, or if it is the hallway monitor. Those are, you know, while the admin is making the decision with regards to the suspension, it is the boots on the ground teachers, you know, lunchroom, hallway monitors, recess monitors that are the ones that are having to manage this behavior every day. And so I respectfully disagree that referral shouldn't be included in this. I think referrals are not handed out lightly, and because I know that our teachers and our staff use an extreme amount of discretion with that and are good about that. And I don't think it would be anyone's goal to force a student out of school. But I think that if a student who is transferred here and we've allowed in, you know, with good intent on the district's end, and the student and their family needs to maintain good intent on their end, And if they're constantly getting written up for bad behavior, I don't want it to have to reach to the level of suspension at a certain point. If a student is here, and we've allowed them in, we voted to allow them in, we have an obligation to our students that are already here. To keep them safe, we have an obligation to the teachers to manage what we can and help them out with, you know, having policies in place around good behavior. And so I don't think one referral per month, you know, totaling 5 referrals or something like that in a school year is too much. I think that if a student's written up that much, there's clearly an issue and they need to seek they need to work with their parents to seek elsewhere, because we need to maintain the integrity of our schools and we also have an obligation to do that.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I agree with a lot of what you said. I just want to be clarified. I don't think the incentive would ever end up being a teacher's trying to get that student out. I think actually the incentive would end up being the opposite, right? If I'm a teacher and all of a sudden I find out one more referral and this kid's gone, I don't want to see the kid gone, right? You're always trying to save the kid. So I think you're going to get the opposite consequence happening. You're going to end up seeing less referrals throwing on that kid, in my experience, my opinion. But I, in my personal opinion, I would also just say if SSD has a recommendation to change this, I'm for it. Otherwise, this is an administrative decision, in my opinion, and I think the administrator should make it.
Question is, does the suspension have to come with one incident? Do referral, given many, do they equal up to a suspension?
If you've ever looked at our behavior matrix, you'll see that some incidents and some referrals do equal a suspension and some do not. There's certain things that do not, like when they're added up, they do not. We do have internal documents and internal processes that we kind of follow beyond this. So when we're monitoring students, for example, our district attendance team meets and monitors the attendance. They monitor the intervention that they're providing for the family, the principal, and staff, like counselors are meeting with the family to support them. And the same is true for behavior. And so there are incidents where, you know, a referral happens, another referral happens, the family is transferred, there is a conversation that's there saying, you know, if you have one more referral that equates to a suspension, after that, you will, and if you do that behavior again, then you're automatically out of the district. We generally see those behaviors turn around in those circumstances. And so sometimes the referral is part of that actual intervention step, the point where the student and family come together with our administrators and counselors or whomever, the dean of students perhaps, if it's at a school with a dean of students, they come together and they have that conversation and it does become more of a partnership, and we do see behaviors turn around in those circumstances. And then other times we don't, and the student is free.
So does this include in-school suspensions?
Right now, there is specific language between the in-school and out-of-school suspension. And I don't recall, but I don't want to say, but I can give you it. Okay. I have a question for you that has nothing to do with this behavior and attendance situation. The numbers that we're allowing in versus the numbers we're allowing out. I know this is not a very warm, fuzzy thing to say, but if we're losing money or we're not where we need to be in our budget, why do we want to allow any students to leave, let alone 30? Why are we not a district that wants to say, I mean, I know that's not the nice thing to say, like if my child really was struggling and wanted to go somewhere else, I would want my district to take that into consideration. But from a business standpoint, why do we want to allow even 30 if we really need those bodies to stay in our schools?
From a business perspective, we don't. However, what we have discussed in the past is that keeping families, keeping students that don't want to be here for whatever reason that is, was worth the offset to let those folks go and, rather than force them to be here, force them to be a part of our community, they don't want to be. That's, I don't think I said it very eloquently, but that's kind of the end result. Yes, business wise, we should say, no, we're not gonna let any out. But there's kind of a culture to letting people that don't have a desire to be here go where they.
I'm sorry.
I would also add to it that not all of our surrounding districts, but most of them allow kids out as well. And so the kids that come to us have to be released by another district. And so it's, there are districts who draw the line in the sand and said absolutely not, but for the most part, that's not the case. And it's part of playing well in the sandbox on some level too. But as a business decision, I totally agree. But that's why that's been our discussion in the past.
I think for me, it's hard as a community member, and I've voiced this some as well, but when I have people say, you know, like, oh, so-and-so left to play a certain sport. I have a hard time with that, you know, because I want to see kids do well, I want kids to be happy, and I want them to be where they're thriving, but that's not an academic concern.
Yeah.
And so it's at the detriment of our district that those kids live here, but leave to go play a sport somewhere else. Some of those things just continue to trouble me a little bit, and I get asked about it a fair amount. So that's why I felt like we need to at least address it as best we can. Those are decisions that we independently make for those students, even though I think sometimes people think we do. So yeah, I don't know if there's any other better way to address that, but it sounds like we just set a number and do our best to accommodate.
I remember having that conversation last year when we were releasing students. I think that the argument behind it was, we've never stood in the way of people's education. If they don't want to be here, we're gonna let them go. And to Abby's point, with the athletic piece, I'm living this world right now where I work, and I have kids coming from this district to where I work, and it's super awkward, and it's weird, and I don't like it. And I think we're just kind of on the precipice of this with like all the NIL stuff that's going on, and we're not alone. Everyone thinks the grass is greener on the other side, and I'm here to tell you it's not. I think we're just hitting the iceberg with these types of transfers, unfortunately. My hope this number doesn't get bigger, but it would not be right.
I think I should add if you look at the 30, right, I would imagine that most of them are kids with educator parents who work in other districts and want their kids in those districts, just like we have. Right? And you have another set of kids that for whatever life circumstance either don't want to be here or need to be somewhere else. And so, we hit that 30, and then, it's not about athletics, even though that is a very much an irritating kind of thing. You wonder how many athletes are we getting in, if you kind of do that. I don't think with this 30, the driver is athletics. And when we hit that threshold, I do think it's important we play in that sandbox with other districts. And we do accommodate those situations to the best of our capacity. But you're right, from a business decision, it's not great. I would hope this would not become an athletic thing, because if it's really about athletics, the families need to move to where they think the grass is greener, right? And that's just, yeah, well, I mean, that's a life choice. Right?
And you can't do anything about it. You get someone that moves mid-year and buys a house and leaves in the middle of the year. That's happening, and you can't stop that. I'm kind of wondering, are we set on 30? Can we do 20? How can we still play in the sandbox, but not feel like we're giving too much away? Just something to think about.
Jim, we hit 30 every year, yeah.
We hit 30, I think this year we're at like 36, 37. There is also a hardship process that families can go through. And so occasionally we will get a student who, particularly the younger grades, of course, would parents need to move the child for daycare reasons. And so at that point, it's kind of out of our hands. It's a hardship. It meets the definition of a hardship as set by the state. And so that student is allowed to go. But of the kind of voluntary number, that 30, it is discretionary. You guys can choose to raise it, to lower it. It has been 30 for a number of years, even a few years where we mid-year chose, partly because of our capacity issues, we chose to actually increase it to allow a few out.
Can we be more specific in terms of limiting the high school transfers? It has to be, we're only accepting so many high school transfers and then the rest.
My understanding, maybe Gary can help me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we can set the number of students coming in based on grade and even building if we chose to. But the number leaving the district is just a flat number.
I think that's correct. I'm not 100% certain, but I think that's correct. It's been a while since I've read the law. But I think that's right.
Is it possible would anybody be in agreement to push this agenda item to the next meeting so that we can get the information and the concerns that we have addressed prior to voting on this?
I'm support of that.
Are we going to run into problems with other districts who are waiting on us to release kids?
Right.
That's my
We will run into that, and we will run into other districts that open this month, their certain number. And those numbers fill up before any students that want to come to us would be approved by us.
I'm seeing the window here is March 21st to April 5th, and that's pretty much everyone's window, right? So we're gonna miss that if we delay it.
Yes, they are all in that general range. And we would look out on students if that's the case.
So it would hurt us.
Yes.
So-
And one more question, historically, you said it's a lottery in, are we consistently historically meeting that many requests to come in?
No, not over the last few years that I've been heavily involved. I think 1 year we had to do a lottery in 1 grade. But now we have been opening enough slots that generally in the window between now and April 5th, we typically don't fill any particular grade. Over the course of the year, we had 3 grade levels this year we're in that either approached or hit the maximum for that grade level. But after that April 5th window, then it's just first come, first serve until the slots are filled.
So just to piggyback off of Hans's question, you had the numbers at least of how many we would take in far exceed the 30 that we would lose. Are we typically gaining more than we're losing in a year?
Yes, we usually have, I shouldn't say usually, over the last couple of years, we've had twice as many students coming in as exiting.
Yeah, so that I personally don't see a problem.
I'm not sure if I see a problem. I just want to be clear that these are not numbers that we just vote on and say sure and then pass it along and don't take a moment to actually sit down and think about what we're saying here. Because they are things that come up with us day to day. And if this isn't something that we're able to push off without having consequences, then maybe it's something that we continue to have conversation about even as we look at it for next year. I do know that we bring in far more kids than we release, and I know a ton of kids move into this district for all of the right reasons. And I'm not trying to be the tough person who, isn't listening to the reasons why a kid needs to transfer out. Just knowing our budget and wanting to maintain what we have. I don't want to see kids leaving that don't need to be.
You as a board are required to make this determination at least once a year.
Yeah.
So you do have the option of setting some number today, both in and out, and revisiting that at a point in the future when you feel you have the information you need.
Okay.
I'm just struggling with I really am hung up on the behavior thing.
Well, I think what he's saying is that if we choose to move forward with it as is, this isn't something that we don't have the opportunity to revisit. And I think going through the behavior matrix and maybe getting some of your questions answered might help with that, because there is a big disconnect for us. And Marlene, you know everything about the schools and what's going on in schools. And we try to keep up and know as much as we can, but we definitely miss pieces. And so, we know of kids, maybe not personally, but you hear of kids who have a stack of referrals and you think, that doesn't mean though that there's someone who transferred in.
Well, no, I know that, but
Right.
if they are someone that transferred in and they're constantly causing problems for teachers and other students, we should have the ability to say, you've had this many referrals. we're so sorry, you know, but this was the rules, and that's what life is, like, you have to, there are rules.
And I understand your intention behind that, but I do feel confident also that Marlene's explaining that they are taking those steps as well.
Yeah,
So,
I just feel like there's a lot that takes a kid to get suspended, and with all of the things, the restrictions that are put on us, you know, through that, and sometimes it's just, it shouldn't be just that. So, I would like to revisit that policy, I mean, honestly, I just think there needs to be more to it.
I think it's twofold, sir. I think it's twofold in the sense that we're trying to look at this from a business perspective and a discipline perspective. And I don't want to be hasty in our decision making tonight to where we look like we're not playing well with other districts.
Right.
When we're so close to the release date from everybody and having to make those big decisions for families. So I want to look at this too,
Yeah.
especially for next year, and run numbers and check policy and make sure that we have all the information we need, and we can go in and revise numbers and can go and revise policy if we need to.
So if we were to vote on this tonight, can we revise the requirements after voting this in?
From a technical perspective on the law, the only vote you're voting on is the number of slots.
Okay, perfect.
The others are not a decision that the board has to make. They're a staff decision we can take input on, but this will not affect that in any way, shape.
Okay, so we can vote this on tonight, but then we can have a separate meeting with whoever wants to attend. Whether, and if there's more than one word, we can read about it in public, but about this behavior thing, because it's really concerning me. And I'm not, I want to be clear, I'm not implying that it's the transfers that are right, but we have to be able to control it.
Yeah, and at that time, we can go over more of our internal process. I should note that there is a couple nuances to this. If a student's behavior is, and that student's on an IEP, and it's determined that it's a manifestation of their disability, by law, we cannot revoke their transfer. So there are some nuances to the other things that we would automatically revoke that is not here is a drug and alcohol offense or something like that. Any of those extreme where it goes to 5 days suspension or expulsion, those are automatic revokes of the transfer.
So you said that the requirements are a staff and admin position. Is it something we can move to be a policy? Working together with, you know, following the guidelines of what you just said in the future?
Like your conversations.
If we're voting to, I see the benefit in doing it, right? So if we're being asked to vote on allowing people to come in, I feel like that we should also be allowed to have input on what requirements have to be met. So.
she's asking me, not me.
I think this would probably, fall under the category of maybe an administrative rule in AR to an existing policy.
Okay.
I don't know, I mean, sure, boards can pass policy on anything,
Right.
whether it holds to the legal thresholds is a whole different thing.
Right.
And a lot of times when boards pass policies that aren't like vetted properly, there's a lot of unintended consequences. So I think we can look at it. I'm thinking AR on this one. But the place to start would be to get some information, the data.
Yeah.
And that is a good place to start.
Okay. And I feel like this is one that having a meeting conversation, I think that we're gonna pretty easily land in a pretty similar place. I think it's just that you need more clarification, we need more information.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll be able to get there. That's makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with Krista, the refinement is necessary.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, now we're really muddy in the waters here.
Now we're voting.
We're still voting on the numbers. What we're voting on is the numbers. The transfers in, the transfers out. That is what is important for the motion this evening. So does anybody have a motion with regards to interdistrict transfers?
I move to approve the opening of the proposed inter-district transfer slots into and out of the Sherwood School District for the 2024-25 school year as per the district administration's recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm not gonna ask if there's additional discussion, because I think we had it all. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. All right, that is the end of all of our agenda items. At this time, we welcome any additional public comments not pertaining to the agenda this evening. We have at least one public comment from Cindy Shadbolt. And I think you're gonna have to join us up here at a microphone to be heard.
I also have a horrible cold, so I can't breathe through my nose. And my comments are 2 minutes and 57 seconds to be within the line, but if I go to 3 minutes and 10 seconds, I hope I'm not cut off. So just saying that I've earned my right for waiting until the very end of the meeting, but I will be very succinct. My name is Cindy Shadbolt and I've been a Sherwood resident for 26 years. My husband and I have raised 3 sons who attended Sherwood schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. I've also been a teacher at Sherwood Middle School for the past 17 years. I feel compelled to address the school board and district administrators in regard to the recent hiring process for the Sherwood Middle School principal position. I participated in the surveys, the listening sessions, and all other opportunities for input. I trusted the process would be professional, ethical, and above all else, everyone involved would be looking for the best person to lead SMS. That is what our staff asked for. Someone who knew us and would continue to build our culture and advocate for what is best for our building, our students, and our families. To my dismay, I quickly learned the process was muddy. The optics of how the process went caused mistrust and concerns amongst our staff. Here are facts. The SMS principal position was posted for weeks and those interested were able to apply. The chosen candidate did not apply during the timeframe the job was open. Only after meeting Dr. Lyons at the Sip and Spell fundraiser did the district reopen the principal position for less than 24 hours for the chosen candidate to apply. Past practice for hiring has been that staff is sent an email and those interested are given an opportunity to be on the interview committee. This time, staff were not asked to participate, but individually selected by the district office. Because I was not on the interview committee, I cannot speak to that process. However, I can speak to what happened after the interviews. Interviews ended on Thursday. On Friday, a parent approached our current vice principal and shared the news that the chosen candidate thought he was hired. The problem is our vice principal was one of the 3 candidates who applied. She had not been contacted, yet the news had already been leaked to a parent. We learned that only 4 people, Dr. Lyons, 2 other members of the DO executive team, and the chosen applicant were aware of the confidential hire. Dr. Lyons stated that it was disappointing this information was leaked to people outside of those 4 people. I'm not only disappointed, but I'm concerned and unsettled that confidentiality was not adhered to in this situation. Staff was then given the opportunity to meet with the same district office leaders to share our overwhelming concerns, which became even more disheartening. Staff was called smug and told that in the community eyes, the middle school was a negative place, which was very hurtful to us. In closing, Sherwood Middle School is an amazing school.
That's fine.
It is hard to swallow that all of the good work being done has gone unnoticed and not celebrated. We work hard. We love the kids that come through our doors. We invite parents and the district office to come in and participate in our work. We want a leader who will come alongside us, who knows the work we have done and will celebrate with us. I believe the hiring process did not accomplish the goal of what is best interest for our students, families, and staff of Sherwood Middle School. Thank you for listening to my comments.
All right, that is the only comment this evening. The next meeting of the board will be held on April 17th, 2024. I hope you guys all have a safe and restful spring break. Everyone has definitely earned it. This meeting is adjourned.